When reading and writing poetry, it's important to understand poetic techniques so that you can utilize them. So let's start out by looking at some of these poetic techniques. The first one we're going to talk about is verse. A verse is a single line of poetry. How many verses are in this poem? I'll give you a second to figure that out. Alright, as you can see, each line of this poem is considered a verse. So let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 lines or verses in this poem. Next we have stanza. A stanza is a fixed number of lines of verse that form a unit of poetry. It's used to separate ideas within a poem. A stanza in a poem is very similar to paragraphs within a paper. Each stanza stands for a different idea of a poem, just like in an essay you'll have main idea 1. The first stanza will cover the author's first main idea. And then in the essay you have main idea 2, and the second stanza will cover the second main idea of the poem. Stanzas have different names depending on the number of lines or verses within the stanza. A 2-lined stanza is called a couplet. A 3-line stanza is a tercet. A 4-line stanza is a quatrain. A 5-line stanza is a quintet. A 6-line stanza is a sestet. A 7-line stanza is a septet. And an 8-line stanza is an octave. About verses and stanzas, we'll talk about rhyme scheme. Rhyme scheme is the order and pattern of rhymes at the end of the lines of a verse or poem. So to discover the rhyme scheme, you start by looking at the first line. And you see that it ends in the rhyme paralyzed. So we put an A right there. Next we look at the second line, oversized. If that rhymes with paralyzed, which it does, we put an A next to that line also. Then we look at the third line, should. Does should rhyme with paralyzed and oversized? No, it doesn't, so we have to put a new letter, B. Then we look at B. Does B rhyme with should or oversized? It doesn't, so we put a C. Does me rhyme with B? Yes, so we put a C next to this line. And then we look at our final line, good. Does good rhyme with me? No, it doesn't rhyme with B, but it does rhyme with should, so we put another B besides good. When we looked at the rhyme scheme, we looked at the end rhyme, and that's when the last words of 2 or more lines of a poem rhyme. This is probably what you're most accustomed to seeing and hearing within a poem. So here's our example. I think I shall never see, so that's the end of that line, a poem as lovely as a tree. So the ends of both of these lines rhyme together, therefore it's an end rhyme. Now what you might not be as accustomed to is the internal rhyme. This is when 2 or more rhyming words occur in the same line of a poem. So let's look at The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of some one gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, only this, and nothing more. So we see some in rhyme with lore, door, and more, but we also have internal rhyme within this poem. As you can see, dreary and weary, which are in the same line, rhyme together. Now, let's give you a second to see if you can find another internal rhyme within this poem. So let's read line 3 again. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping. So napping and tapping form another internal rhyme in this poem.